hope, disappointment, fame, failure, exhaustion, contentment, anxiety, success, joy, anger, sadness. When you look back at your life, doesn't it feel chaotic? Nothing like a straight line, nothing like the neat, tidy stories we're used to from books and movies. We spend our whole lives afraid of losing, afraid of ending up alone, afraid of being judged, and just as afraid of being ignored, of no one caring at all. We're afraid to look reality in the eye, and just as afraid to look away. The world seems perfectly designed to keep us anxious. And in the end, we die. Put that way, the whole story starts to feel a little absurd and kind of tragic. So you start asking yourself, what's the point of all this? Why are we always running? For Togashi, a middle school student, the answer to that question always seemed obvious. He runs because it's the one thing he's truly good at. He has a natural talent for it. Running is what earns him recognition from his classmates, praise from his teachers and parents, and shelves full of gold medals in his room. He never really stops to ask himself whether he even enjoys running. And yet, the 100-meter dash is the one thing that lets him forget about everything else for a moment. The manga Hakuemu, 100 meters, tells Togashi's life story across 5 volumes, following him from his school years all the way into middle age. It was written by Uoto, the creator of last year's breakout hit On the Movement of the Earth, a story about scholars discovering heliocentrism in medieval Poland. Interestingly, even though 100 meters only received its anime adaptation much later, at the end of 2025, the original manga actually came out before On the Movement of the Earth, back in 2018. In many ways, it was Uto's first real, serialized work. And yet, calling it a major success would be a stretch. It wasn't cancelled early, like many less popular series tend to be. But at the same time, its volume sales were fairly modest. But after the success of On the Movement of the Earth, this manga finally caught the attention of a talented director, Kenji Iwaisawa, the founder of the small indie anime studio Rock and Roll Mountain. Iwaisawa is one of the most underappreciated creators working today, maybe because he's largely self-taught and never came up through the major studio system, or maybe because before 100 meters, he had only made one full-length feature film, Ongaku, Our Sound. At first glance, Ongaku looks like a simple, minimalist comedy about kids who want to be in a band, despite barely knowing how to play music. But that first impression is misleading. Once you look closer, you realize the film took Iwaisawa and his tiny team over 7 years to make. And Iwaisawa himself wore almost every hat imaginable: art director, character designer, sound director, animator, editor, storyboard artist, screenwriter, and director. He organized real-life concerts to use as the basis for the film's music scenes, personally filmed all of those performances, paid for much of the production out of his own pocket, and then painstakingly traced over the footage by hand to achieve that fluid, detailed motion in the animation. In total, he drew more than 40,000 individual frames for the film himself. Ongaku is the kind of film that only exists because of pure passion for animation. It's the result of stubborn persistence and raw creative drive. So it's not surprising that Iwaisawa was drawn to 100 meters and agreed to adapt it. What mattered to him wasn't the manga's popularity or commercial potential, but the themes it explored, and whether it offered an experience that resonated with him on a personal level. On the surface, 100 meters looks just as simple as Ongaku. Lots of dialogue, grounded character, and background designs, and almost no action in the conventional sense. But this is an Iwaisawa project, and somehow, even while showing nothing that seems particularly spectacular, the series does it with such care, such precision, and such emotional intensity that it's hard to wrap your head around how beautiful it gets. Just like in Ongaku, Iwaisawa makes heavy use of rotoscoping. The difference is that for the music film, the live-action references were acted out by his friends and acquaintances, including, interestingly, the original author of the Ongaku manga. For 100 meters, however, he brought in real professionals. Most notably, the team worked with Masashi Iriguchi, a 4-time Japanese national champion in the 100 meters, and it's his running style that Togashi inherits on screen. Rotoscoping is an incredibly demanding animation technique. It might seem like tracing over real actors should be easier than animating everything from scratch, but in reality, it's often harder. People are constantly making tiny, almost imperceptible movements, even when they appear to be sitting perfectly still. Rotoscoping has to capture all of that subtle motion accurately. Otherwise, the result starts to feel off. Because of that, even the most ordinary scenes require an enormous number of drawings. In 100 meters, there's a nearly 4-minute sequence done as a single continuous shot, entirely using rotoscoping. To pull off that one scene, the team had to draw 9,830 frames. About 3,500 of those were background animation, and another 6,330 were the runners themselves in the foreground. And even then, that's not the whole story. Most of the background frames, the trees rushing past, were drawn by Iwaisawa alone. He felt the task was too complex and too precise to delegate to anyone else. On the surface, 100 meters looks simple. But the longer you pay attention to Iwaisawa's choices, the more you start to realize just how intricate and deliberate that simplicity actually is. He constantly introduces visual techniques that weren't present in the original manga, but translate the characters' inner states with far more clarity and emotional force. Handheld camera-like movement, first-person perspectives, visualizing physical sensations instead of explaining them in dialogue. Iwaisawa has a rare ability to find complexity and beauty inside what appears, at first glance, to be plain and simple. And that's exactly what turns 100 meters into something genuinely special. Iwaisawa's approach mirrors the story of 100 meters almost perfectly. On the surface, what could be simpler than a 100-meter sprint? What could be more straightforward than a sports anime? A genre where you usually feel like you understand the entire arc from the very beginning? And yet, 100 meters shows just how deceptive that sense of simplicity really is. This is a story with real structural depth. The linear progression and seemingly plain narrative only serve to mask how layered it actually is. We follow Togashi's life, but along the way, he keeps colliding with other runners, and each of these encounters subtly shifts the trajectory, not only of Togashi himself, but of the people around him. Over time, these trajectories start to intertwine, shaping each other in ways that aren't immediately obvious. It all begins back in middle school, when Togashi meets a boy named Komiya and teaches him how to run. He shares with him a simple philosophy, the one he lives by himself. It doesn't matter how good you are at school, how socially confident you are, or what your relationship with your parents looks like. If you can run well, you can run away from your problems. From most of them, forever. And from the rest, at least for the 10 seconds it takes to sprint 100 meters.
Wow.
Komiya takes that idea to heart and starts dreaming about records. But there's one thing holding him back, an old injury, no matter how hard he tries. In the middle of every race, his mind goes back to it, and he instinctively slows down, afraid of getting hurt again. The person who helps him break through that mental barrier is Zaitsu, a national 100-meter champion who visits his school one day. Zaitsu gives Komiya a new push by telling him to put his life on the line every time he runs. You can't get rid of fear and anxiety, he says, so you might as well use them. Run as if these are the last 100 meters of your life. At the same time, Togashi crosses paths with another runner, Takeru. Like Togashi, Takeru keeps winning his races, which isn't surprising given that he's the son of a famous sprinter. But where Zaitsu tells Komiya to give everything to the race, Takeru echoes his father's philosophy. If you want to stay in this sport, if you want to be valued, you have to be first, every single time. And while Zaitsu's words lift Komiya up, Takeru's become a burden for Togashi. By the time he reaches high school, Togashi starts to worry that his speed isn't improving, that he can't break new records anymore, and that winning races is becoming harder and harder. In the end, even though he remains technically undefeated, he decides to quit track and field altogether. Togashi loses sight of why he was running in the first place, and no longer sees the point of staying at the top.
Why aren't you interested in the track and field club? We currently have 3 members who are officially in it. And no one's really interested in track and field anymore these days.
Excuse me.
But everything shifts again when Togashi runs into other athletes. For the first time, he meets someone who is genuinely inspired by his talent, his classmate, Aoi. And soon after, he learns that Takaru, the runner he once looked up to, has quit as well. Officially, it's because of an injury, but in reality, it's because he couldn't bear the weight of other people's expectations anymore, especially his father's. And this time, the roles reverse. Now it's Togashi's turn to try and motivate his senior. He reminds both Takeru and himself that running isn't just about winning, it's also about the simple, personal joy of running itself. But over the next 10 years, that simple truth slowly gets distorted. Togashi turns into something like an office worker of the sports world. He keeps running in the middle of the pack, good enough to have his contract renewed, but never good enough to win, never good enough to break records. This is when another key figure enters the story, Kaido. He's older than most of the other runners and has spent his entire career in the shadow of that same champion, Zaitsu. All his life, he's been trying to beat him just once, and every single time, he comes in second. People have already started to write him off. But Kaido keeps training obsessively, using running as a way to escape from that quiet, crushing reality. In a way, Kaido becomes a living reminder of the very thing Togashi once told Komiya back when they were kids. If you can run fast enough, sooner or later, you can run away from your problems.
I see. So this is my reality. Well then, if that's the case, it's time to escape from reality.
Seeing Kaido's stubborn persistence reignites something in Togashi. He starts training seriously again, aiming for the top once more. And at the same time, he notices Komiya climbing that same mountain, pushing himself harder and harder. Togashi begins to dream about the two of them meeting again on the same track.
Set.
But one final obstacle stands in his way. During a training race, Togashi gets injured. Now, every explosive start, every burst of speed, risks being his last. Just like Komiya before him, and Takeru before that, Togashi is forced to face the same question. Are you willing to put your entire life, your entire career, on these 100 meters? Are you willing to run, even with fear and anxiety clawing at you? In the end, all of the characters converge in the final races. Kaido finally defeats Zaitsu, overtaking him at last. And once the title is passed on, Zaitsu, freed from the weight of being the champion, is finally able to walk away from the sport, in peace. Komiya, meanwhile, suddenly finds himself facing an unexpected emptiness. For the first time, he doesn't really know why he's running anymore, or what he's supposed to do once he breaks yet another record. And Togashi, after going through his own long and painful journey, reminds his rival, his friend, his former classmate of something simple, but fundamental. The value of a race isn't just in records and victories. It's in the fact that you gave it everything you had. That, for 10 brief seconds, you managed to run away from all of your problems.
What is the point of it? Why do we continue to run?
Yes, on paper we're following Togashi's story, but along the way, we end up stepping into the lives of so many other athletes. And what becomes clear is that their stories are, at their core, variations of the same struggles, injuries, unmet expectations, imposter syndrome, pressure, stress, fear, and anxiety. The difference isn't the problems themselves, it's the order they arrive in, and the stage of life at which each person is forced to face them. In that sense, every character in the film becomes a reflection of Togashi. They're the people he resembles, the person he could have become, the paths he chose not to take, the version of himself he almost turned into, and the version he still wishes he could be. They're the ones he inspired, and the ones who, in turn, inspired him. That's why the world of the film starts to feel almost unreal in a very specific way. It's as if everyone, from exhausted office workers to teenage girls hanging out in a shopping mall, is interested in this sport. Even the boys Togashi meets in the park after his injury end up talking about their school, a 100 meters race. It's not meant to be literal. It's a way of showing that, for Togashi, running has become the lens through which he sees the entire world. That's because 100 meters isn't a straightforward linear story. It's more like a kaleidoscope, made up of the same small, colorful pieces, but forming a completely different picture depending on how you look at them. It's a story built out of many simple, familiar lives. And together, those lives come into one larger, more complex reflection on a single question. Why do we run?
Set.
The characters in 100 meters all arrive at different answers to that question. Komiya runs for success and records. Kaido runs to change his reality. Takaru runs because everyone expects him to. Aoi runs because it's fun. Zaitsu runs because that's where he finds his own sense of meaning. Some people run for the company. Some run for the feeling of freedom. Some run because it pays the bills. And Togashi keeps searching for the answer to why he runs at all. The 100 meters suggests that, in the end, we're all more alike than we think. We go through similar experiences, just in different orders, at different points in our lives, and with different conclusions. We're all running somewhere. But where we're running to, and why, is something each of us has to decide for ourselves. And yet,
Hope,
希望
glory,
失望
disappointment,
栄光
setback,
挫折
fatigue,
疲労
satisfaction,
満足
frustration,
焦燥
achievement.
達成
put all of that into a single life. Put all of that into a 100-meter sprint. Feel those 10 best seconds. And live your best life.